Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a chapter of American history so strange, so uncomfortable, and so full of questionable medical advice that you might need a warm glass of milk just to process it. We're talking about morphine addiction among Civil War veterans. Yes, you heard me right. Tonight is all about the era when wounded soldiers came home with more than just haunting memories and suspicious facial hair. They brought back a little bottle of liquid comfort, handed to them by a doctor who believed leeches were a good first step and hand washing was optional. Before we get rolling, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim those lights, put on your coziest socks, turn on a fan for that gentle white noise, and settle in. Maybe pull the blankets a little tighter. After all, you never know when you'll be prescribed a soothing tincture by a mustachioed stranger. Let's take a moment. Have you ever wondered what it was like to survive the Civil War, only to face a totally different kind of battle at home? Did morphine really come in bottles labeled miracle cure? Did your local apothecary double as a street dealer with better hair? How many times did a doctor recommend bed rest and a little morphine for literally everything from a gunshot wound to a mild case of existential dread? Was it possible to survive the carnage of Gettysburg just to get taken out by a poorly labeled bottle of syrup? Did anyone ever ask, "Hey doc, is this stuff safe?" And, of course, how did anyone fall asleep at night surrounded by creaky beds, unpredictable roommates, and the constant threat of waking up to a Victorian intervention? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1856. The war is over, your leg hurts, your mustache is crooked, and someone is offering you a bottle of morphine, no questions asked. Welcome to America's strangest medical afterparty. The war is over, but your day starts with the same feeling of confusion and a strong desire to not get tetanus. Your bed is a rough canvas cot, and the air is a pungent mix of sweat, whiskey, and whatever hope smells like after 4 years of war. Welcome to the Civil War Field Hospital, where anesthesia is still a luxury, and you're about to be introduced to your new best friend, morphine. You open your eyes and immediately wish you hadn't. Overhead, there's a patchwork tent that's doing its best impression of Swiss cheese, letting in shafts of sunlight and every bug with aspirations. Beside you, a man is snoring so loudly you briefly consider whether the war has really ended, or if you've been conscripted into some new, noisier version of it. Your back aches, your leg aches, and if you're honest, parts of you didn't even know existed ache. You try to shift in bed, but the movement is met with a jolt of pain, so sharp you think, well, that's definitely still attached for now. Around you, the field hospital hums with a kind of exhausted chaos. Nurses in sweat-soaked dresses hurry between cots, carrying tin bowls of mysterious broth and what might generously be called bandages, though they look suspiciously like yesterday's undershirts. Somewhere, a surgeon is shouting for more carbolic acid, and you try not to think about the fact that, in 1856, germ theory is still just a twinkle in Pasteur's eye. The smell alone could qualify as a controlled substance. It's equal parts blood, wood, smoke, whiskey, and an undertone of something that can only be described as medical panic. Next to your bed sits a tray with a chipped glass and a bottle labeled, in ornate script, morphia, for relief of suffering. You stare at it, blinking. Yesterday, you would have given anything for this. Today, you're not sure whether to drink it, dab it on your wounds, or use it to barter for a better pillow. Morphine, you soon learn, is the miracle cure nobody questions, mainly because everyone is too tired to argue and too polite to mention the drooling. A nurse breezes over, her hair escaping from a lopsided bun, and gives you the look all field hospital nurses have mastered. Don't ask questions, just swallow. She pours a small dose into your mouth, chases it with a sip of tepid water, and says, "That'll help you sleep, dear." The taste is bitter and oddly floral, and it burns all the way down. You'd protest, but your tongue is already going numb. Within minutes, the edges of the world soften. The noise from the next cot fades. Your pain recedes like an awkward relative at a family reunion, still present, just less interested in making itself known. You float in and out of consciousness, drifting on morphine's gentle tide. There's a moment, somewhere between dreaming and waking, where you wonder if you'll ever feel normal again, or if normal now means staring at the ceiling, counting holes, and hoping your nurse is the one with the steady hands. Eventually, you manage to sit up. Bad idea. The room spins, your vision tunnels, and you clutch the cot as if it might launch itself into the nearest cornfield. Your body is a patchwork of stitches, splints, and bruises that look like modern art experiments. You run your fingers over the bandages, rough, scratchy, and absolutely not sterile. Someone tried to clean your wounds with a rag that smells strongly of last night's whiskey ration. Through the tent flap, you catch glimpses of life outside. A soldier limping, a surgeon lighting his fifth pipe before breakfast, a chicken wandering by as if it owns the place. You wonder what comes next. Will you go home? Will your leg keep behaving? Will you need that morphine bottle again tonight, and the next night, and the next? The nurse returns, offering you a crooked smile and a biscuit so hard it could be used as a doorstop. She says, "You made it. That's the important part." And maybe she's right. You survived the battlefield, you survived the surgeon, and now you're surviving the strange, blurry world of recovery, one small, bitter dose at a time. And somewhere in the distance, you hear a familiar refrain. "Rest up, soldier. You've got a new war to fight." Only this one comes with a label and a whole lot of fine print. Welcome to your new life. The morphine's just getting started. Let's talk about medicine, 1860s style. The good news? The doctor is here. The bad news? His toolkit consists of a bone saw, a bottle of laudanum, and hands washed last week. When it comes to pain relief, morphine isn't just on the table. It's practically the main course. Your first sight of the doctor is not exactly confidence-inspiring. He enters the tent wearing a blood-streaked apron and a hat that was fashionable back when Andrew Jackson had working knees. His whiskers twitch as he sizes up your wound, and for a split second, you wonder if you're part of some experimental meat raffle. He carries a battered wooden case that he opens with theatrical flair, revealing the tools of the trade. A gleaming amputation saw, a variety of knives with names like bone knife and flesh separator, a metal syringe the size of a turkey baster, and several bottles of medicinal spirits for when the doctor gets nervous and needs a quick pick-me-up. Sanitization is optimistic. Instruments are given a casual wipe on the hem of his coat. Maybe, if you're lucky, he'll wave them over a candle for that signature seared but still questionable flavor. Germ theory is mostly just a rumor at this point, so nobody's losing sleep over a little dirt. In fact, the only thing more likely to cause a fever than your wounds is the doctor's opinion on hand washing. Soap? That's for Sunday, son, he grins, rolling up his sleeves. The field hospital is a blur of movement and muffled groans. The doctor's assistant, usually an affatine, unfortunate young man whose last job was clerk or farmhand, is frantically boiling water in a blackened kettle, but mostly for show. Occasionally, someone pours whiskey over the tools, then takes a swig themselves, just to even things out. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, tobacco, and the persistent whiff of old blood. Somewhere in the background, someone is sawing wood, and you try not to imagine what or who is being prepared. pain management is a dazzling mixture of science and wishful thinking. There's laudanum, a tincture of opium in wine, which tastes like heartbreak and feels like sleep. But for the real heavy lifting, it's morphine time. The doctor uncorks a brown bottle, draws a careful measure into his gleaming metal syringe, and gives you a look that says, "Brace yourself." The needle is long enough to stir soup, and there's no gentle bedside manner, just a quick jab and a muttered prayer. Within minutes, your pain recedes, replaced by a sense of floating above your own mangled body. For a brief, blissful moment, the horror fades. The downside? You're about to get very, very familiar with this ritual. And let's not forget the other tools, the bone saw, for when things get really bad. It's as heavy as it looks, with a handle worn smooth by 1,000 desperate operations. The doctor tests its edge on his thumb, shrugs, and tells you to bite down on this leather strap and think happy thoughts. Anesthesia is scarce. There might be some chloroform, but more likely it's whiskey and a pep talk. If you're lucky, you pass out before the sawing begins. If not, well, you'll have a story that nobody will want to hear at Thanksgiving. Despite the horror movie props, there's a strange kind of hope in the doctor's work. He's seen it all. The wounds, the infections, the miraculous recoveries. Sometimes, he's even right. Occasionally, he'll wrap up an operation, wipe his brow, and tell you, that should hold till spring. You want to believe him. You almost do. Outside the tent, another patient waits his turn, cradling a shattered arm and a deep mistrust of anyone in a blood-stained apron. Inside, you've survived the surgeon's toolkit, the world's most dubious hygiene, and a healthy dose of 1860s optimism. Your reward? A bottle of morphine, a roll of coarse bandages, and the knowledge that in this war, survival is equal parts medicine and miracle. Congratulations. You've just experienced Civil War medicine, where the toolkit is half science, half guesswork, and 100% unforgettable. Here's how it starts. A kindly nurse hands you a small, cloudy bottle and tells you it'll take the edge off. The liquid inside promises peace, sleep, and maybe a brief vacation from the horror of having your femur reassembled with wire. One gulp, and the world feels fuzzy. You barely register the nurse's smile as she tucks the stopper back into the bottle with a practiced snap. For a moment, there's just the faint, medicinal tang on your tongue, and a warm, creeping numbness that flows from your throat to your toes. You lie back and let the field hospital dissolve around you, replaced by a swirling haze that's part comfort, part confusion, and entirely more pleasant than the alternative. Someone nearby mutters a prayer, but you can't tell if it's for you or for themselves. Time gets weird. Your pain shrinks to a distant background noise, like a neighbor's violin practice. Still annoying, but suddenly bearable. Your body, which just minutes ago felt like a collection of random, mismatched parts, is now an oddly weightless whole. It's as if the morphine has pressed the mute button on every nerve ending below your neck. The surgeon's grim face blurs around the edges, and the tense canvas ceiling takes on an unexpected beauty. Is that a water stain or a map to a better place? Hard to say, but you're tempted to follow it either way. Someone asks how you're feeling, but your mouth is slow to cooperate. Fine, you manage. The words slurring out in slow motion, half drowned in your own drool. You try to smile, but your lips feel like they belong to a much sleepier person. The nurse pats your shoulder, takes your pulse with gentle fingers, and reassures you that this is just what you need. You're not inclined to argue. The bottle is sitting on the table now, catching the late afternoon light and glowing like an elixir from a fairy tale. You almost expect it to sprout wings and fly away. Other patients watch with a mixture of envy and hope. You can see it in their eyes, the silent, desperate wish for the pain to stop, just for a few minutes. Morphine isn't rationed for special cases. It's handed out with almost religious ceremony. Some soldiers clutch the vial like it's a lucky charm. Others gulp it down with the single-minded intensity of a man who's seen too much. The effect isn't just physical. Your mind floats into unexpected places. You remember home, the way the porch creaked at sunset, the soft clatter of your mother's dishes, the smell of biscuits baking, untainted by gunpowder and disinfectant. For a fleeting moment, you're far from the war, far from the mess of bandages and screams and the steady hum of saws. You're drifting between memory and morphine, and it's not half bad. But nothing is perfect. Not even this. After the first wave of relief, a kind of drowsy detachment takes over. The voices around you grow distant, but the nurse's voice cuts through. Don't worry. You'll sleep soon. She's right. Your eyelids drop like stage curtains, and dreams tumble in. Some are soft and forgiving. Childhood, laughter, lost friends. Others are strange, morphine-fueled visions, a marching band of chickens, your old sergeant turning into a cloud, the moon floating just above your pillow and whispering, "Rest up, soldier." The world's edges are gone. Time loops and stutters. And you can't tell if it's night or day outside the canvas. The pain never fully disappears, but it's distant, tamed, reduced to a dull echo. Somewhere deep inside, you know this relief comes with strings attached. But that's tomorrow's problem. For tonight, you surrender to the gentle pull of the morphine tide. When you finally wake, minutes, hours, or a lifetime later, you're left with a peculiar sense of emptiness. Like waking from a beautiful dream you can't quite recall. The pain is waiting, patient as ever, but you remember the calm. The bottle sits quietly by your bedside. Its promise is undiminished, whispering, "You can always come back." And just like that, your new relationship has begun. One dose at a time. Physical pain is only part of the story. Every sound in the night reminds you of cannon fire. Sleep doesn't come easy. But that little bottle of morphine doesn't care if your wounds are on the outside or the inside. It's there for both. The doctors and nurses fuss over your stitches and set your bones, but nobody can set your mind right. When the lamps are blown out and the tent falls silent, that's when the second battle begins. The field hospital by daylight is noisy and chaotic. Surgeons shouting, men groaning, the endless scrape of boots across muddy floors. But at night, the quiet is almost worse. Shadows flicker against the canvas, and every distant cough or creak is a rifle shot in your memory. You lie perfectly still, jaw clenched, waiting for the next nightmare. Real or imagined. Your body aches, sure. Sometimes the pain is sharp and bright, like stepping on a nail that never goes away. Sometimes it's a dull, grinding throb in your joints, settling into your bones as if you've swallowed gravel for breakfast. But just as real is the other pain, the invisible kind, the one that sits behind your eyes, just out of reach, like a word you can't remember. Regret, fear, grief, they collect in you the way damp collects in an old house. You can try to ignore it, but sooner or later, something starts to rot. No one tells you how loud memory can be. You're drifting off, then suddenly you're back on the battlefield. You hear the whistle of the mini balls, the crash of artillery, men shouting and falling, the muddy smell of blood mixed with burnt powder. There's a flash, maybe lightning, maybe just your mind playing tricks. You jolt awake, heart pounding. Sweat soaks your shirt. Your hands shake, and for a moment you don't know where or when you are. Welcome to the Civil War's least popular souvenir, the unending echo of trauma. The men around you know the feeling, even if nobody talks about it. There's a certain look you start to recognize. Wide eyes, sudden flinches, the slow, careful way they move when someone shouts too close. Nobody wants to admit how much it hurts, inside and out. It's easier to ask the nurse for another dose, to watch the world blur at the edges, and to let the bottle do the heavy lifting. Morphine becomes your invisible shield. A few drops and the pain softens, the edges of memory dull. For an hour or two, you can breathe again. No more flinching at shadows. No more silent screaming inside your head. Your dreams float farther away, washed out by the tide of numbness. If the price of peace is a little confusion, a little forgetting, so be it. Sometimes you wonder if you're trying to treat the pain or the memories. You don't ask. Neither does anyone else. But there's a price. The numbness doesn't just block the agony. It muffles everything. Soon you notice you're laughing less, forgetting the taste of things. Letters from home arrive, and you read them twice, the words sliding off your mind like water off wax. The world feels muted, wrapped in cotton, and you start to lose track of days. Was it Tuesday, or was that yesterday? Is it morning already, or just another grey afternoon? Sometimes you catch yourself staring at nothing, drifting between worlds. The nurse asks if you're all right. You nod, not trusting yourself to explain. You're not sure you want to. Being numb is better than feeling everything at once, even if it means you feel almost nothing at all. Even the nurses know. They look the other way, handing out doses with the same care as a bedtime story. And yet, some nights, when the wind shakes the tent or the thunder rolls, you reach for the bottle before the fear can find you. You know this isn't a cure. It's just a break, a little space between you and the weight you carry. Morphine can't fix what the war broke, but for a while, it lets you float above it all, pain, trauma, and the allure of numbness. It's a dance you never wanted to learn, but now you can't forget the steps. Tomorrow, you'll try again. Tonight, you settle for sleep, bought one drop at a time. Morphine isn't just for soldiers anymore. As you limp home, you discover your hometown pharmacy is happy to sell you a bottle, no prescription, just a handshake, and a gentle warning to use as needed. Suddenly, everyone's aunt is treating their migraines with a Civil War souvenir. It's a new era, and as the dust of battle settles, America gets a crash course in the wonders of modern chemistry, by which we mean absolutely no oversight. The war is over, but the morphine stays, hitching a ride in battered satchels and inside the coat pockets of every man with a limp and 1,000-yard stare. Your own supply, once rationed by desperate field medics, is now as easy to come by as a jar of pickles. The apothecary smiles as he slides the cloudy glass vial across the counter, as if he's just handed you a box of chocolates and not the next big crisis in American medicine. At first, the whole town is grateful for the change. Morphine is a godsend for those who can't sleep through the sound of fireworks on the 4th of July. It soothes aching joints, settles wounded nerves, and calms the relentless headaches that seem to follow anyone who's ever been within earshot of a cannon. You swap stories at the general store with other veterans, how much to take, which brands burn less going down, and whether you can mix it with apple cider without seeing angels. Nobody seems too worried. The alternative is waking up in a cold sweat, or worse, waking up remembering. But it isn't just the soldiers. News spreads fast. and soon half the town is convinced they have war nerves. Your neighbor's grandmother has a nervous constitution. Your sister's friend has female complaints. And little Tommy's recurring nightmares are prescribed the same medicine you were given for a shattered leg. The doctor, relieved to finally have a remedy that works for something, anything, writes use as needed on every slip of paper and goes home early. There's even a traveling salesman passing through with a trunk full of patent medicines, each one boasting a splash of morphine, a hint of chloroform, and enough wild claims to fill a year's worth of newspapers. Morphine's popularity isn't subtle. It slips into every household, tucked behind flour tins and sewing baskets, stashed next to the Bible on the nightstand just in case. Local mothers chat over the fence about dosages for teething babies. Sunday sermons now include a prayer for clarity of mind and steadiness of hand. And you're pretty sure the choir director has been extra mellow lately. There's a kind of camaraderie in it all. A quiet understanding between townsfolk that life hurts, and a little bottle can take the edge off. The label on the vial changes sometimes, but the advice never does. For relief of pain, nervousness, and general malaise. And who doesn't have general malaise in 1866? The world is loud and unpredictable, and if morphine can hush it down for a few hours, well, isn't that progress? But progress, it turns out, comes with a shadow. Before long, you notice people taking more than just the occasional sip. The blacksmith's hands shake unless he's had his medicine. The storekeeper forgets your name for the third time this week. Someone's aunt hasn't left her bedroom in days, and the town's children have grown suspiciously quiet. Rumors swirl, private shame wrapped in polite conversation. She's not herself lately, they whisper. Must be nerves. Or maybe it's the cure itself, working a little too well. You start to wonder if anyone really knows what use as needed means. There's no measuring, no questioning. Just trust in a tiny glass bottle with a promise as vague as a campaign speech. In the end, you realize you're still marching, just down Main Street instead of muddy fields. The uniform is gone, but the war isn't. It's just moved indoors, and everyone, it seems, has brought home a souvenir. The line at the pharmacy grows longer every week. Morphine, once a battlefield secret, is now Main Street's answer to everything, and nobody's ready for what comes next. Insomnia was the unofficial sequel to the Civil War. Veterans lie awake, haunted by memories and mosquitoes, chasing sleep with whatever is on hand, usually morphine, sometimes just wishful thinking. After the war, sleep became a luxury item. The battlefield may have ended, but the noise never stopped. The boom of artillery lived on in the thunder. The whistle of wind through the trees sounded a little too much like cannon fire. You close your eyes and try to rest, but your brain, forever stuck on alert, refuses to believe the war is over. Every night is a game of hide and seek with your own mind, and you always lose. The bed isn't helping. It's lumpy, uneven, and smells faintly of damp straw and regret. Pillows are stuffed with whatever the local store had left. Corn husks if you're lucky, mystery fibers if you're not. You lie there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling that creaks louder than your knees. Somewhere in the corner, a mouse is staging a paver, late-night concert. You think about throwing a shoe at it, but that would require moving, and movement leads to pain. The pain leads to morphine. And morphine, well, that leads to everything else. Sleep, as it turns out, doesn't stand a chance against memories. They arrive uninvited. Flashes of smoke, cries in the dark, the smell of burning gunpowder. You can't tell if you're dreaming or remembering. Your heart races, your breath catches, and the room seems to shrink around you. When the panic finally passes, you reach for the bottle on the bedside table. A familiar shape, cool against your fingers, whispering promises of quiet. Just a few drops, you tell yourself, enough to take the edge off. The first sip brings that familiar warmth, crawling up your spine and curling behind your eyes. The tension unravels. The walls soften, and you sink into the kind of peace you imagine other people find in prayer or long baths. Within minutes, your mind drifts like a boat slipping its moorings. The memories fade, not gone but distant, muffled. You know it's temporary, but for once, temporary feels like a gift. Morphine becomes the night's faithful companion, the lullaby you never asked for but can't sleep without. The newspapers call it a miracle sedative. Doctors call it progress. You call it mercy. And honestly, who's going to argue? The country is full of people trying to forget, soldiers, widows, even doctors themselves. Everyone's tired. Everyone wants silence. Morphine is the closest thing anyone's found to peace in a bottle. Soon, sleep becomes an experiment in chemistry. A few drops for a headache, a spoonful for nightmares, a full dose for the nights when the shadows won't stop talking. You learn how to balance just enough to drift without spiraling. Too little, and you're back in the trenches. Too much, and you'll sleep through the rooster, the sunrise, and possibly the next 3 days. It's a delicate science, the kind that makes you feel like both a patient and a pioneer. But peace comes at a cost. Some nights you wake up drenched in sweat, your heart pounding as though your body has realized it's been tricked. Other nights, you sleep so deeply you wake unsure of the day or even the year. The line between rest and oblivion blurs until they're practically the same thing. The dream world is safer anyway. Cleaner, quieter, mercifully numb. Out in town, everyone's running their own version of the great American sleep experiment. The pharmacy sells tiny vials like candy, and conversations begin with, "What helps you sleep?" Some swear by prayer, others by whiskey, but most agree nothing works quite like the doctor's little bottle. A nation that once fought for freedom now fights for a few hours of dreamless peace. And as you drift off, you can't help but think, this is what winning feels like. Drowsy, detached, and finally, mercifully asleep. You're not alone. Every veteran at the barbershop, post office, and local saloon is managing a cocktail of chronic pain and relentless anxiety. There's an entire army of men falling asleep at inappropriate times, including church pews and public benches. If you thought the war ended on the battlefield, think again. The battle just moved to Main Street, and it's being waged with droopy eyelids and half-finished sentences. Every third man you pass in town is operating at half speed, like someone poured molasses into the gears. Church services are a symphony of muffled snores. The town meeting is interrupted every 5 minutes by a thud, another deacon sliding off his chair. Even the local preacher has started adjusting his sermons, tossing in the occasional amen just to see who's still awake. You begin to notice the signs everywhere. The barber's pole spins slowly outside, and inside, 3 men wait their turn, each with a glassy stare and a tendency to nod off mid-conversation. "Just resting my eyes," they insist, as if a quick nap in the barber's chair is a sign of good moral character. At the post office, a line of veterans shuffles forward, stopping abruptly whenever someone needs to be gently nudged awake. Even the mailman has started carrying smelling salts, just in case he needs to revive Mr. Perkins before handing over a letter from his cousin in Ohio. Public benches, once the domain of old men and stray dogs, have become the favored battlefield for this new kind of exhaustion. At any given hour, you'll find a half-dozen men snoring, hats tipped over their faces, hands loosely curled around a cane or, more likely, a half-empty bottle of medicine. Conversations are punctuated by yawns, and local children have learned the fine art of tiptoeing around sleeping grown-ups, lest they trigger a startle response and a string of words that probably shouldn't be repeated in polite company. It isn't just the veterans, either. Word gets around that morphine is the solution for aches, nerves, and the all-too-common restless mind. Soon, everyone from the shopkeeper to the schoolteacher has their own bottles stashed in a drawer, just in case. The town begins to drift through its days in a pleasant haze, trading nightmares for naps. The only business thriving more than the pharmacy is the pillow shop, and even that's mostly due to customers falling asleep while testing the merchandise. This epidemic of public napping comes with its own set of challenges. The town's annual 4th of July parade grinds to a halt when half the marching band stops to take a restorative pause on the courthouse steps. The mayor is discovered snoozing during a city council meeting, pen still in hand, mouth wide open. Even the local stray dog seems to be catching on, curling up next to anyone who looks likely to drop a sandwich mid-slumber. But underneath all the drowsy humor lies a quieter truth. Life hurts, and the war didn't leave anyone unscathed. The men napping in public aren't lazy. They're exhausted in proof. The war didn't leave anyone unscathed. Ways the rest of the world can't see. Morphine gives them relief from pain, from memories, from the sharp ache of loss. It's a medicine, a miracle, and, for some, a crutch they're not quite ready to throw away. Still, there's a comfort in this shared sleepiness. You look around at your fellow nappers and realize you're all in this together, united not just by war, but by the struggle to make peace with what came after. The morphine army is everywhere, nodding off at the barbershop, dreaming in the park, snoring through Sunday's sermon. For now, at least, it's a town at rest. And honestly, after what everyone's been through, maybe that's exactly what's needed. Your mother-in-law swears by her secret tonic for nerves. 2 drops of morphine, a dash of brandy, and whatever else fits in a teaspoon. The family medicine cabinet is basically a chemistry set without the safety instructions. If you ever wondered what Victorian self-care looked like, imagine a shelf loaded with mismatched bottles, sticky corks, and labels promising miracles, or at least a few hours of blissful unconsciousness. Step right up and take your pick. Dr. Langley's restorative syrup, Aunt Agatha's nerve elixir, or a mysterious greenish liquid simply marked for troubles. Every household boasts an apothecary collection that could, at any moment, be used to cure, sedate, or accidentally pickle a family member. Children grow up thinking medicine is supposed to taste like shoe polish and feel like being wrapped in a warm, slow-moving fog. You catch a cold? There's a syrup for that. Equal parts honey, opium, and herbs. Tomyak, try the special drops your uncle swears he got from a doctor in Philadelphia, which turn out to be about 40% gin and 60% plausible deniability. No one's really sure what the ingredients are, but everyone is pretty sure it's the good stuff. Opening the family medicine cabinet is a bit like opening a treasure chest and a potential crime scene. Bottles of laudanum jostle for space with jars of camphor, tins of mentholated salve, and mysterious sachets filled with powder of willow bark, which might just be old sawdust. The air around the cabinet is permanently scented with a cocktail of cloves, turpentine, and whatever hope smells like after a bad winter. If someone in the house is feeling poorly, which, let's face it, is almost always, the solution is a custom-blended home remedy. Headache? A spoonful of the blue tonic, and if you're still awake in an hour, add the yellow one. Cough? Half a teaspoon of Dr. Hollister's soothing elixir. But not more than twice, or you'll end up like Cousin Walter. No one talks about what happened to Cousin Walter. And the adults aren't the only ones getting creative. Children are handed quieting powders before bed. guaranteed to produce at least 8 hours of dreamless sleep, and occasionally a lifelong fondness for strong drink. Babies are teethed with rag, soaked in brandy, then rocked to sleep to the sweet lullaby of a morphine haze. The pharmacy sells teething syrup containing enough opium to make an alligator sleepy, and people wonder why the baby never cries. The medicine cabinet is also where family secrets go to hide. Grandma's nightcap turns out to be 2 ounces of laudanum, chased with a cordial for digestion. Dad's special liniment for his rheumatism makes him smell like a pine forest and act like he's inventing jazz. Even the family dog isn't spared, a little morphine mixed with beef broth to calm his nerves during thunderstorms, or whenever he looks at you funny. And if all else fails, there's always the fallback, brandy. Nothing, says Victorian cure-all, quite like pouring a splash of booze into whatever you're taking, just to make sure you don't feel anything too deeply. After all, if it works for heartbreak, it might as well work for boils, bunions, and existential dread. Of course, nobody is actually reading the instructions, if there are any. Dosing is more of an art than a science. Just a teaspoon, no, the big one from the drawer. Or was it the smaller one? You'll know if you took too much. The only safety warning comes from your aunt, who mutters, "Careful, dear, or you'll end up talking to the wallpaper again." In the end, the family medicine cabinet is less a symbol of health and more an ongoing experiment in chemical optimism. Did it cure anything? Maybe. Did it help people sleep, relax, or temporarily forget they lived in a world without indoor plumbing? Absolutely. And really, isn't that all anyone could ask for in Victorian America? At first, it's just a little drowsiness. Then you're sweating through your only good shirt, arguing with your reflection, and losing track of time. The label said cure, not wild roller coaster of side effects. Nobody warns you about this part. The bottle sits so innocently on the bedside table, promising a gentle ride to be comfort, maybe a few hours nap, and a break from the background hum of pain and anxiety. But once you've had your second, third, or 13th dose, the ride gets bumpy. At first you blame the weather. Maybe the heat is why your shirt is soaked and your skin feels like it's humming. Maybe the fog in your head is just another sleepless night. But then you start noticing patterns, and those patterns are about as subtle as a marching band in a library. One day you're alert and almost chipper. The next, you can barely muster the energy to answer the door. You lose the thread of conversations halfway through, leaving your friends to wonder if you're pausing for dramatic effect or just rebooting. The family is baffled. Your spouse gently asks if you're feeling all right before you start reciting the Gettysburg Address, out of order, to the cat. The physical side effects start stacking up. Your skin gets clammy and pale, then flushed and feverish, all in the space of an hour. Your appetite comes and goes, replaced by a craving for, well, mostly just more morphine. The medicine cabinet becomes a revolving door of symptoms. Muscle twitches, chills, and the kind of restless energy that makes you want to reorganize the pantry at 3 in the morning, only to forget why you're holding a jar of pickles. As for your mood, welcome to the world's most chaotic carnival. You might cry at the sound of church bells, laugh at the newspaper obituaries, and get irrationally angry when someone moves your shoes. Arguments with your own reflection become a regular event. You stare into the mirror, squint, and wonder who that pale, sweaty stranger is and whether he's plotting against you. Let's not forget the dreams. Once upon a time, they were nice, a return to home, or long walks in summer fields. Now, the morphine drags you into feverish, technicolor hallucinations, talking horses, backwards rain, and reunions with people you're pretty sure you never actually met. You wake up groggy and disoriented, clutching the bed sheets and questioning reality. Your dreams are so vivid that you start to suspect your waking life might be the illusion. And of course, your memory is the first casualty. The days blur together in a slow-motion montage of naps, lost objects, and half-finished meals. You start forgetting little things. Where you put the mail, whether you've eaten, if you already took your dose. Then come the big things. Important dates, faces, whole afternoons that just vanish. Your friends and family grow concerned. You seem different, they say. You nod and smile, secretly unsure if you've met them before. The community, once united by the relief of pain, slowly becomes a confederacy of confusion. People wander the streets, glassy-eyed and sluggish. Someone falls asleep in the general store. Someone else locks themselves out of their own house 3 days in a row. Nobody is willing to blame the miracle cure, but everyone is quietly suspicious. The town doctor, overwhelmed by complaints and confessions, starts carrying a notebook titled "Things That Definitely Weren't in Medical School." Yet, somehow, life continues. You adapt, finding small ways to cope with the side effects. Looser shirts, frequent naps, a notebook to track which conversations you've already had. The morphine might have given you relief, but it also delivered a circus of chaos. You're never quite sure what version of yourself will show up each morning, and still, every night, you eye the bottle on the nightstand. Despite the side effects, despite the wild, unpredictable ride, you know you'll probably reach for it again, because when the pain is waiting just on the other side of sleep, even a wild roller coaster starts to look like a fair trade. You're trying to keep it together, but the neighbors are starting to talk. Soldier's disease is the new gossip in town. It's easier to hide a missing leg than a growing morphine habit. It's a cruel twist of fate. You fought your way through battles, survived bullet wounds, and outlived the war itself, only to come home and discover you're still fighting. This time against whispers and side glances. People used to point at your empty sleeve or limp and say, "He's a hero." Now, they murmur, "He's got that look in his eye." And you know exactly what they mean. It isn't admiration anymore. It's suspicion. And nothing spreads faster in a small town than a suspicion with a catchy name. Soldier's disease. That's what the newspapers call it now. A polite way of saying you can't put down the bottle. At the barber shop, the talk is as thick as the shaving cream. Did you hear about old Henry? They say he takes a tonic just to get out of bed. In church, the congregation prays for the afflicted, but the prayer comes with a side of pity and a dash of judgment. You notice the way people avoid your handshake or the way the pharmacist suddenly asks a lot more questions when you come in for a refill. It's an odd kind of shame. Nobody blames you for the nightmares or the pain that gnaws at your bones every time it rains. Everyone understands why you'd want to take something for the ache, but they don't understand why you keep needing more. They don't see the long, restless nights, the shaking hands, the way your mind races even when your body is exhausted. They only see the empty bottles piling up behind the stove. You start hiding the evidence. You stash your medicine in the flour tin or the barn, inventing chores that let you sneak away for a quick dose. When the family asks about the sleeplessness or the sudden naps, you blame the weather or an old war injury flaring up. Nobody's convinced, but nobody wants to say it out loud. The other veterans know, of course. You recognize each other by the restless fidgeting, the glassy eyes, the half-hearted jokes about doctor's orders. At the general store, you exchange quiet nods and half smiles, as if you're all members of a club nobody meant to join. Sometimes you swap advice: how to hide the shakes, how to make a dose last longer, which doctor is more likely to look the other way. But there's not much comfort in camaraderie when everyone's pretending nothing's wrong. Worse are the well-meaning townsfolk who treat you like a walking cautionary tale. He used to be so strong, they sigh, loud enough for you to hear. Mothers shoo their children away when you pass, whispering, "Don't bother him. He's not himself these days." Your friends start to drift away, unsure what to say or do. Even family grows distant, locking up their own medicine cabinets and keeping one nervous eye on the silverware drawer. The more people talk, the harder it gets to admit you need help. Pride digs its heels in. After all, you were the one everyone leaned on during the war. Now, you're supposed to just snap out of it, or toughen up. You try, God. Do you try? But the pain is patient, and the shame is relentless. So you put on a brave face and act as normal as possible, even as you wonder how many other heroes are suffering in silence. Sometimes you dream of starting over somewhere new, where nobody knows your name or your secrets, but most days, you just hope tomorrow will be quieter, that the talk will fade, and that someday, soldier's disease will be understood for what it really is. A wound like any other, just harder to see. Until then, you keep going. You take each day 1 hour at a time, hoping that someday the world will remember that survival isn't always something you can see, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep going, even when the battle looks nothing like what you survived before. A brightly painted wagon rolls into town, promising miracle cures, free samples, and a banjo solo. You line up with everyone else for a bottle, not sure if you're buying medicine, hope, or just a reason to laugh at something that isn't war. The wagon itself is a marvel, red, blue, and gold, festooned with hand-lettered signs that shout, "Revitalize your spirit," and guaranteed remedy for all ills. Atop the wagon stands a man in a velvet coat and a hat with more feathers than sense, waving to the crowd as his assistant strums a cheerful tune on a battered banjo. For a moment, the town forgets about its aches and sorrows, swept up in the spectacle of showmanship and the promise of something, anything, new. The medicine man launches into his pitch, voice booming like a preacher on Sunday. He promises cures for headaches, heartache, rheumatism, baldness, shyness, and the general malaise that plagues the American spirit. Each promise is met with laughter and applause. You can't help but smile, even if you know deep down that the cure probably tastes like turpentine and delivers a nap more reliable than a church pew during a summer sermon. The assistant, part banjo player, part crowd wrangler, hands out tiny paper cups of the miracle elixir. You sip, and your tongue prickles from the odd blend of licorice, molasses, and something that burns all the way down. A unique, proprietary formula. The medicine man winks, with the finest imported morphia and a touch of local spring water. Nobody asks how much morphine. Nobody wants to know. The show rolls on, blending music, jokes, and a little sleight of hand. There's a magic trick with doves, a story about curing a senator's gout, and the inevitable demonstration where someone's grandmother is called up to the wagon, given a generous dose, and miraculously finds relief from her sore knee, at least until she falls asleep standing up. The crowd cheers, eager to believe. You look around and realize everyone is here. War veterans, tired mothers, children wide-eyed at the spectacle, and even the town doctor lurking in the back, arms crossed, but eyes interested. Everyone wants what's in the bottle, even if they're not sure what it is. You buy a bottle because that's what you do when the wagon comes to town. It's tradition, it's hope in liquid form, and it's a small rebellion against the unrelenting ordinary of post-war life. The medicine show is part performance, part therapy session. For a few hours, you get to laugh, forget, And imagine a world where relief is as easy as turning a cork. You listen to the banjo, clap along to the jokes, and watch neighbors shuffle away, bottles tucked in pockets, and hope flickering in their eyes. It doesn't really matter if the elixir works as promised. The important thing is that, for a moment, you feel like you're part of something bigger, a town united by faith in a stranger's pitch and a bottle's gentle hush. But the carnival atmosphere fades as quickly as it arrived. The wagon moves on, the music echoes away, and you're left holding your bottle, the label already starting to peel. Maybe it'll help your back, maybe it'll let you sleep. Maybe, just for tonight, it'll give you something to believe in that isn't disappointment or pain. You measure out a dose, take a sip, and decide you'll worry about side effects tomorrow. As the crowd drifts home, some laughing, some wobbling, some with the glazed eyes of the newly relieved, you wonder if the real miracle is the medicine or the momentary escape it brings. Either way, when the show leaves town, everyone is a little lighter, a little drowsier, and a little more willing to line up again next time, hoping for a cure, a show, or maybe just a good nap. High society isn't immune. The local doctor prescribes morphine for everything from headaches to heartbreak, and your neighbor's living room doubles as a very polite opium den. Hats required. Shame optional. If you think addiction is just for the battle-scarred or the bedraggled, think again. The grandest homes in town have started to develop a curious perfume. A mix of rosewater, pipe smoke, and just a whiff of something sweetly narcotic. The family. Silver is polished, the piano is tuned, and the only thing missing from this week's parlor party is a clear memory of what happened at last week's parlor party. It starts innocently enough. The doctor makes his rounds, bag in hand and mustache freshly waxed, prescribing a little morphia for the nerves or just a pinch of laudanum for those feminine troubles. He assures Mrs. Alderberry that a tincture of opium will help her sleep and perhaps keep her from ringing the maid's bell 17 times after midnight. The next thing you know, the social calendar is filled with restorative teas, sedative luncheons, and the increasingly popular Wednesday night dream society. Every gathering is an experiment in subtlety. Ladies arrive with their embroidered fans and small velvet purses. Inside, not rouge, but a small vial from the chemist, nestled right next to a peppermint. Gentlemen boast about their connections in London or New York, as if superior access to imported opium is a mark of good breeding. The evening begins with gossip and polite laughter, but soon enough, the piano is abandoned, the conversation grows languid, and the group drifts, one by one, to the divans and overstuffed armchairs. No one calls it an opium den, of course. That would be scandalous. Instead, it's a restorative gathering or a therapeutic salon. The lamps are turned low. The only rule is decorum, slippers for the ladies, no feet on the upholstery, and for heaven's sake, don't spill on the Turkish rug. Pipe smoke curls lazily to the ceiling, and the host serves cordials laced with just enough morphine to turn a lively debate about poetry into a slow-motion exchange of compliments. Addiction, when it wears pearls and cologne, is far easier to ignore. Friends and family talk in gentle euphemisms. Delicate health, sensitive disposition, or prone to fainting spells. If someone nods off at the dinner table, the host simply dims the lights a little further and offers an extra cushion. Meanwhile, newspapers run articles warning of the yellow peril of opium in faraway Chinatowns. Never mind that the same poppy-derived comfort is being served with petite fours in the heart of respectable suburbia. Behind closed doors, these parlor parties grow ever bolder. After dinner, a discreet circle forms in the library, and soon the quiet clink of teaspoons in glasses is joined by the soft laughter of people who haven't worried about anything in hours. The socialites who would faint at the idea of public drunkenness think nothing of a shared pipe or a sip of laudanum punch. In this world, shame is simply bad manners, and the only thing that must never be discussed is how many vials you have hidden in your sewing basket. But the cracks begin to show. The conversation grows repetitive. Memories blur. And the next morning's headache is just as likely to be from withdrawal as from the sherry. People begin to forget names, appointments, or the reason they started taking medicinal comfort in the first place. The line between luxury and dependency blurs until nobody's quite sure which side of it they're standing on. Still, every week the parlor fills again. The hats are hung by the door, and the bottles are passed with the dessert tray. Because here, in the gentle glow of lamps and laughter, addiction is not just tolerated, it's tastefully accessorized. The morphine and opium dens of high society offer the same promise as the battlefields and back alleys. A brief, beautiful escape from the weight of the world. And really, isn't that what everyone's after, whether you call it a den, a salon, or just another Wednesday night? One day you try to stop. You don't make it to lunchtime. The world turns into a carnival of misery. Chills, panic, and the sudden urge to punch a pillow or write sad poetry about your pancreas. Nobody warned you about this part. The doctor mentioned mild discomfort and suggested maybe switching to herbal tea if you ever wanted to. Cut back. You're not sure if he meant for you or for himself. You wake up one morning, tired of the fog, determined to be stronger than a little bottle of morphine. Today's the day, you think. Today you're done. You make it as far as breakfast. The first thing you notice is the sweating. Not the kind that comes from a hot day or a bad dream, but the kind that soaks your undershirt before you've even finished buttering your bread. Then come the chills. You wrap yourself in every blanket you own, only to rip them off again 5 minutes later, convinced you're boiling alive from the inside out. By mid-morning, your skin is crawling. Every hair follicle seems personally offended by your decision to quit. Your hands shake so badly that your coffee ends up on the floor, and you briefly consider just drinking it off the rug. Your legs refuse to sit still. You pace, you fidget, you rearrange the chairs in the kitchen, then move them back, then wonder who keeps moving the chairs. Mentally, it's a 3-ring circus. Anxiety swings from the rafters, dragging guilt and self-loathing behind it like a parade. You're convinced you've made a huge mistake. The whole world seems sharper, louder, and more irritating. The ticking of the clock becomes an insult, the creak of the floorboards a threat. You snap at anyone who dares to speak, then immediately apologize. Your family gives you a wide berth, making nervous small talk from the next room. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Fine," you lie, through clenched teeth and a jaw that's beginning to ache. By noon, the nausea sets in. Your stomach, never your strongest ally, declares open rebellion. Food is out of the question. Even water seems suspicious. You eye the medicine cabinet like a fox. Eyes, a henhouse, full of desire, full of shame. You promise yourself you'll hold out just a little longer. The headaches start next. A slow, relentless pounding that refuses to be reasoned with. Your eyes water. Your nose runs. You can't tell if you're cold or hot or simply dissolving. You try to sleep, but your body jerks you awake with every memory you'd hoped to forget. And there are so many memories, each one dressed up in new, creative ways by your newly unleashed imagination. Emotionally, you're in the trenches. Shame arrives for its daily shift, armed with reminders of all the things you wish you hadn't done or said. Every secret dose, every little white lie. Guilt is its faithful sidekick. You start rehearsing tearful confessions to the cat. who remains stoically unimpressed. You briefly consider writing poetry, but every line comes out sounding like, "Why, Pancreas? Why?" By late afternoon, you're bargaining. Maybe just one dose, maybe just enough to make the shaking stop, just enough to make it through dinner without snapping at the potatoes. The shame is real, but the relief is closer, more tangible, and much more persuasive than any sermon you've ever heard. Some people muscle through, most don't. Not because they're weak, but because withdrawal is a beast with sharp teeth and a bad sense of humor. There's no medal for this battle, no parade for your suffering. You're alone with your symptoms and your stubborn hope that tomorrow will be better. You don't make it to bedtime. The bottle wins this time. You promise yourself you'll try again. And you will, eventually. Because beneath the sweats and shame and fever dream guilt, there's still a part of you that remembers life before the medicine and dreams, however faintly, of finding it again. Your family tries to help, but nobody really understands what you're going through. The dinner table becomes a quiet battlefield. Forks clinking, glances exchanged, and the ever-present question, will you ever really come home? It's been months since you returned from the war, but the house doesn't quite feel like yours anymore. The walls are too quiet. The ticking of the clock is too loud. Every sound, every movement feels just a little bit wrong. You sit at the table surrounded by familiar faces, but they look at you the way people look at a storm on the horizon, half in awe, half in fear of when it's going to break. Your wife tries her best. She keeps the house spotless, the meals warm, the conversation gentle. But there's a new tension in the air, like everyone's afraid of saying the wrong thing. "You look tired," she says softly, as though tired can cover everything from nightmares to flashbacks to the hollow ache that morphine used to fill. You nod and smile, but the words bounce off like pebbles thrown at a wall. Your children don't know what to make of you. They remember the man who used to toss them in the air, who laughed too loud, who smelled like pipe smoke and sawdust. The man who came home smells different, sharper, colder, faintly medicinal. They peer at you from behind the furniture, whispering to each other as if you've become a ghost haunting your own living room. You want to call them over, to hold them, to tell them you're still here. But you hesitate, afraid of how your hands might shake. Even your parents don't know what to do. Your mother fusses over you like a child again, offering soup, prayer, and stern lectures about willpower. Your father, who's never been emotional in his life, just nods awkwardly and mutters something about tough times making tough men. But you're not sure toughness is what you need. You need quiet. You need peace. You need to stop waking up drenched in sweat, with the taste of dirt and smoke still in your mouth. So you retreat. The house has its rhythms, mornings of small talk, afternoons of chores, but you move through them like an actor in someone else's play. Sometimes you catch your reflection in the window and barely recognize yourself. The morphine helps at first. It dulls the edges, smooths the sharp corners of memory. It lets you smile, lets you pretend. But the cost is distance. With every dose, you fade a little more, slipping quietly out of the world that used to be yours. Your wife notices. She doesn't say it out loud, but you can see it in her eyes. The fear that she's losing you to something she can't compete with. She finds empty bottles hidden behind the flour tin, the faint scent of morphine clinging to your clothes. She doesn't confront you right away. Instead, she starts watching you more closely, measuring the hours between doses, pretending not to count. At dinner, she tries to bridge the gap with conversation. "The harvest looks good this year," she says, as though crops can compete with ghosts. You nod again, eyes fixed on your plate. The clinking of silverware sounds like gunfire. Your pulse quickens. The children sense it and fall silent. Nobody breathes until the moment passes. Later that night, when the house is still, she finds you sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. "Come to bed," she says softly. You tell her you're fine. You're not. She knows it. But neither of you has the words for what's happening. Families don't talk about soldiers' disease. They call it nerves, exhaustion, bad dreams, anything but what it is. Addiction doesn't fit the image of a hero. So your family copes in silence, learning to live with the version of you that's here, but not entirely present. Some nights, your wife still places her hand over yours at the dinner table. You want to squeeze back to reassure her. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you forget. And sometimes you just stare at the candlelight and think how strange it is to survive the war, only to come home and keep fading away, one quiet dinner at a time. It's not just men. Women turn to morphine for female complaints, nerves, and anything the doctor can't fix with a polite pat on the shoulder. The secret is safe, mostly. If you picture the morphine epidemic as a men's-only club, full of battered veterans, missing limbs, and tales of cannon fire, think again. Behind every locked door and carefully drawn curtain is another story. The kitchen, the nursery, the sewing circle, all are scenes of another quiet revolution, one conducted in whispers, coded recipes, and tiny glass bottles hidden among the jars of preserves. For women, pain and discomfort are facts of life. Childbirth, endless housework, sleepless nights, and a world that expects them to endure it all with a pleasant smile. The 19th century solution? A little something for your nerves, dear. The local doctor, pressed for an answer to everything from hysteria to headaches, prescribes laudanum or morphine with the same gravity he'd use to recommend more starch in your husband's collars. He writes the script, tips his hat, and leaves, none the wiser about the secret society he's just enabled. The rules of the club are simple. Keep it hidden, keep it quiet, and always make sure there's enough in the house, just in case. A bottle in the pantry, a vial tucked into a knitting bag, a spoonful stirred into evening tea. Women share recipes for calming tonics right alongside lemon cakes and pickled beets. When the neighbor's baby won't sleep, the answer is a teething syrup so potent it could calm a bear. For a case of the vapors, a headache, or that nameless, pressing sadness, there's always a remedy on hand, delivered with a sympathetic look and a nudge. It helps. Trust me. The symptoms may be different, fewer war wounds, more whispered sighs, but the cycle is the same. A dose for the aches, another for the blues. Just a little more when the days grow dark and lonely. At first, it's a comfort. The world softens, edges blur, and the relentless duties of Victorian womanhood slip away, if only for an hour. But soon the moments of peace require a schedule, and the vials are emptied a little faster. Withdrawal arrives quietly. Headaches, jitters, tears for no reason at all. You blame it on the weather, or the neighbor's colicky baby, or the strain of running a household with a husband who's home, but not really home. The club is everywhere, but nowhere official. It's present at the church picnic, in the schoolyard, on front porches during long afternoons. If you know what to look for, you can spot the signs. A little more color in the cheeks, a slightly dreamy look in the eyes, the faintest scent of medicine beneath the rose-water perfume. Occasionally, a friend confesses in hushed tones. "I can't sleep without it," she says, or "it's the only thing that helps the pain." The confession is always met with gentle understanding, never judgment. But secrets in small towns never stay secret for long. Sooner or later, the pastor preaches about unwomanly dependence, A neighbor's child is found asleep in the pantry, clutching a half-empty bottle. Whispers swirl, quiet, sharp, and unforgiving. Mothers worry about their daughters, daughters about their mothers. Still, the remedies remain on every shelf. After all, there's work to be done, and the world is slow to offer alternatives. Despite the risks, the club persists. There is strength in these hidden networks, a shared resilience in the face of daily trials that nobody outside seems to notice. And though the doctors and husbands may suspect, they rarely ask. Perhaps because everyone, in their own way, is looking for relief. So, behind closed doors, the women of the town gather, share recipes and solace, and lean on the same bottle the men do, each for their own private ache. The secret, like the pain, is carried quietly, passed down from mother to daughter, wife to friend. And if the world still expects its women to bear their burdens in silence, at least now there's a remedy for that too. Newspapers promise you can soothe your nerves with this modern marvel. Ads feature smiling families, healthy children, and not a single warning label in sight. If it's good enough for the president's wife, it's good enough for you. In the late 1800s, morphine becomes less a medicine and more a miracle lifestyle choice. At least, if you believe everything the newspapers say. Open any periodical, and you'll find full-page spreads gushing about Dr. Wellstone's soothing syrup or Madam Winthrop's nerve powder. The illustrations are always the same. A beaming mother with perfectly coiffed hair, an angelic child holding a bottle, and not a single person sweating through their shirt, arguing with their reflection or writing sad poetry about their pancreas. Advertising executives know their audience. Sick of sleepless nights? They ask. Try our morphine elixir and wake up as fresh as a daisy. There's a solution for every complaint. Nerves, neuralgia, melancholy, rheumatism, colicky babies, and even husband fatigue. Truly a universal ailment. If your life isn't perfect yet, it's because you haven't bought the right tonic. According to the ads, the world could be fixed with a teaspoon and a smile. Advice columns join the chorus. Dear Mrs. Goodwill, begins one letter. My husband returns from work each night grumbling, and I find myself terribly anxious. What should I do? The answer, a discreet nod to the nearest pharmacy. A few drops in your tea, dear, and soon you'll both be whistling through supper. Marital woes, fretful children, ambitious mother-in-laws, no problem that a little morphine can't solve, at least according to the advice columns, which double as low-budget therapy sessions and high-budget sales pitches. No one mentions side effects, of course. The only warnings are against counterfeit products, not the actual contents. Accept no imitation, the ads warn, as if the real danger is getting the wrong brand, not the fact that you're drinking opium with a splash of caramel coloring. The testimonials are a work of fiction all their own. I was hopelessly unwell, writes Grateful in Boston, until I tried Dr. Gladstone's syrup. Now I never miss a garden party. The doctor in the ad wears a spotless coat, a noble beard, and an expression of benevolent wisdom that says, "Trust me, I've never even been near a battlefield." The influence of morphine seeps into every corner of popular culture. Theatre comedians riff on Aunt Minnie's tonic hour. Magazines publish serialized stories in which the heroine overcomes heartbreak and a touch of nerves, with a secret formula from her wise old aunt. Even children's books start featuring plucky protagonists whose parents are restored to health by a few doses of medicinal syrup. A plot device that never quite makes it into the bedtime stories you tell your own kids. At family gatherings, the conversation turns to remedies. Did you hear Mrs. Tinsley tried that new nerve powder? Slept like a log and baked a whole pie by sunrise. There's a sense of competition. Who's found the most effective? most respectable, most fashionably advertised cure. Bottles are shared with neighbors, passed around after church, and displayed on the mantel right next to the wedding china. The magic of popular culture is its ability to make even the strangest habits feel normal. Morphine isn't just accepted, it's celebrated. Being well means being calm, composed, and never admitting to a moment of discomfort. If you're still struggling, well, perhaps you just need a different brand or a double dose. As the ads say, it's what the best families use. Decades later, historians and physicians will marvel at how cheerfully Americans advertised their own downfall. But for now, you're living in a world where problems are solved with a bottle and a wink, and if the side effects are ever mentioned, they're just something to laugh about in next week's advice column. So tonight, when you flip through the newspaper and see those gleaming testimonials, remember, you too can be part of the smiling, morphine-fueled elite. Just write in for a sample, send your testimonial, and don't ask too many questions. If it's good enough for the president's wife, it's definitely good enough for you. Your painkiller comes mixed with chloroform, turpentine, and a dash of mystery. If the morphine doesn't knock you out, the other ingredients might. At least you won't remember your symptoms. In the age of the great American medicine show, every shelf in every apothecary is lined with bottles that look like they belong in a science experiment rather than a home. Each promises a cure for whatever ails you. If not through relief, then at least through distraction or unconsciousness. Patent medicines are everywhere. Their labels brimming with hope, handwritten testimonials, and fonts so ornate you need a magnifying glass and a headache to read them. Take your pick, doctor. Pickett's Universal Elixir, Aunt Martha's All-Healing Liniment, or Professor Blackwood's Electric Tonic. No electricity required. There's a remedy for every complaint: neuralgia, nervous exhaustion, female indisposition, and gentleman's fatigue. And each one boasts a secret formula, known only to the maker and, possibly, the nearest coroner. The ingredients are a masterclass in creative risk-taking. You read the fine print, if you dare, and find an intoxicating blend of morphine, alcohol, chloroform, a squirt of turpentine, and whatever else was handy that morning. Flavoring? Sure, why not? The result is a taste that can only be described as sharp, with a finish of burning regret. If the medicine doesn't cure your headache, it will at least make you forget you ever had a head. For extra credibility, many bottles are stamped with official-looking seals and endorsements. Recommended by doctors in 3 states, or awarded gold medal at the 1883 exposition. Fine print. For most decorative label. Some even come with tiny pamphlets featuring glowing testimonials from people who may or may not exist. My back pain vanished after 1 dose, claims satisfied in Cincinnati. So did my sense of direction and my ability to count to 10. Taking your patent medicine is an event. You pour out a dose, watch it glug into the spoon, and steel yourself for whatever comes next. The first sip is a challenge. The second is a dare, and by the third, you're either asleep, rearranging your furniture in alphabetical order, or telling the wallpaper your deepest secrets. If you're especially unlucky, you might experience all 3 before supper. No 2 batches are quite the same. 1 week, your nerve tonic tastes like wintergreen and makes your toes tingle. Next week, it's more turpentine than tonic, and your neighbor swears it cured his sciatica by making him forget he had legs. If you're suspicious, the salesman assures you it's all part of the magic. The secret ingredient, he whispers, is faith. But you're pretty sure it's actually camphor. Side effects? Of course. They're listed right on the bottle, sandwiched between glowing promises and exclamation points. May cause dizziness, excessive sleep, hallucinations, or sudden desire to poker. The unspoken warning is that the real miracle is waking up the next morning with all your teeth and at least some of your memories intact. Still, for all the mystery and mayhem, patent medicines are wildly popular. Maybe it's the thrill of the unknown, or maybe it's just desperation in a bottle. People pass recipes down through families, argue over the best brands, and swear by cures that sound like they were invented during a lightning storm. If one elixir doesn't work, don't worry. There's always another, usually with more alcohol, more promises, and even less explanation. Over time, you learn to appreciate the absurdity. In a world with more aches and anxieties than actual solutions, a little snake oil starts to look like optimism, bottled, corked, and delivered by a man with excellent facial hair and no medical degree. At least, for a brief, blurry moment, you can believe you're cured. Or, at the precis to leaven-braced, very least, you can believe you've been cured until the next batch of mystery medicine arrives. Because, in the golden age of patent medicine, hope really is the secret ingredient, mixed liberally with whatever else could be found behind the apothecary's counter. Cheers to your health. And good luck remembering where you put it. The local doctor means well, but he's operating on a blend of optimism, mustache, wax, and medical journals from 1832. If you're lucky, his cure won't kill you faster than the disease. Let's be honest. Your best chance of surviving an ailment in 1856 rests somewhere between luck, the resilience of your immune system, and the ability of your doctor to recall the difference between curative and experimental. The man in the black coat and battered hat enters with a reassuring cough and a battered leather bag containing all the tools of the trade, a stethoscope that might as well be a tin horn, a pocket watch that's always fast, and a notebook brimming with remedies for everything from lockjaw to melancholia. There's no shortage of confidence. He greets you with a brisk handshake and the air of a man who's read every issue of the American Medical Times, at least the ones before the pages were used for wallpaper. He sits by your bed, peers over his spectacles, and asks the first of many deeply scientific questions. Have you tried a brisk walk? Perhaps less bread? You describe your symptoms: aches, chills, possibly the soul trying to escape your body, and he nods gravely, consulting a reference text with pages that flutter like ancient butterfly wings. The diagnosis is often a wild ride. Maybe it's ague, maybe catarrh, maybe just bad humors. Medical science is still very much in its let's see what happens phase. One day you're bled with leeches, the next prescribed a syrup of opium, rhubarb, and a pinch of mercury if you can stand the taste. If you have a fever, you might be swaddled in wet sheets and left by an open window, no matter the season. For a cough, the doctor recommends inhaling steam from a pot of boiling onions, which at the very least distracts you from your lungs. Surgery is another adventure altogether. Anesthesia is hit or miss. Sometimes it's chloroform, sometimes it's just a deep swig of whiskey and a pep talk. If you're facing amputation, the doctor reassures you that the saw is sharp, the assistants are sober today, and the operation will be as quick as possible. Success is measured in minutes, not miracles. Medical training is, shall we say, flexible. Most doctors learned the trade by watching their uncle, who learned from a neighbor, who read about it in a letter from a cousin. The latest research takes months, sometimes years, to reach small towns, and by then, it's already been replaced by something newer and equally untested. The average physician is convinced that diseases are caused by bad air, swamp vapors, or a general lack of moral fortitude. Germ theory is still the wild idea of a few radicals overseas. Despite it all, your doctor is nothing if not inventive. Out of quinine for the ague, try a poultice of potato skins and goose fat. No laudanum for the nerves. Maybe a brisk application of electricity, just don't stand too close to the lightning rod. Most cures are a blend of hope and whatever's still left in the medicine chest, liberally applied and cheerfully explained. If you survive, the credit goes to the doctor's steady hand and the good Lord's mysterious ways. If not, well, he fought bravely makes a good line in the obituary. Friends and family gather, exchanging stories about who survived what, and which doctor is less likely to bleed you just for fun. You start to understand why so many people carry rabbit's feet and touch wood before crossing the street. But in the end, you can't help but feel grateful for your doctor's optimism, even if it's misplaced. There's a certain comfort in being cared for, even if the care involves as much guesswork as science. You drink your syrup, endure your poultice, and hope the mustache wax was the only thing in his bag that was truly up to date. Because in 1856, medical science is just another way of saying, let's give it a try and see what happens. You try something new, a syrup invented by Dr. Hamilton that promises to cure everything. You wake up 3 days later unsure if it worked, but you definitely missed your cousin's wedding. Nobody knows exactly who Dr. Hamilton is. Some say he studied medicine in Boston. Others whisper about a brief but dazzling career in Paris. And a few point out that he's always suspiciously vague about his credentials. What everyone agrees on is that his miracle syrup is sweeping the town like a fever, and that, if nothing else, it will give you a fever. The label on the bottle is all gold flourishes and confident claims. Hamilton's Supreme Restorative. For ague, nerves, gout, cholera, melancholy, stiff joints, and excess of ambition. 1 serving size, as needed or until thoroughly restored. You find the bottle on a friend's kitchen shelf, nestled between jars of pickled beets and something labeled ointment. Possibly edible, they hand it to you with a conspiratorial wink, as if you're being invited into a secret society with only 2 rules. Don't ask what's in it, and don't take it before important events. But you're desperate, your head aches, your leg throbs, and you haven't slept a proper night since Lincoln was in office. The syrup is the color of burnt molasses and smells like someone tried to pickle licorice in a thunderstorm. 1 whiff clears your sinuses. 1 sip makes your tongue go numb. 2 sips, and you're halfway convinced you could win a foot race against a horse, if only your legs would cooperate. Your family watches, half in awe, half in horror, as you down the dose and announce you're feeling better already. Nobody believes you, least of all yourself. The effects arrive in waves. At first you feel oddly energized, enough to reorganize the pantry, write a letter to Congress, and attempt to mend a shirt you haven't worn since Gettysburg. Then comes the inevitable crash. Your eyelids droop, your arms grow heavy, and the world's colors start to blur pleasantly at the edges. The family cat seems to be giving you advice, but you decide to ignore it just this once. The next thing you know, it's 3 days later. The sun is in a different spot. Your beard has grown a ½ inch, and your cousin's wedding is nothing but a faint memory of distant church bells and cake. Your family is relieved you're awake, though your aunt mutters something about the sleep of the just and unnatural potions. You're not sure if you feel restored, but you definitely feel different. Naturally, you try to piece together what happened. Apparently, you spent most of the first day talking in your sleep, quoting Shakespeare and singing the battle hymn of the Republic in 3 languages, only one of which you actually know. The second day, you insisted on reciting your grocery list to every visitor. And by the third, you were blissfully quiet, save for a brief incident involving the piano, a jar of pickles, and a very confused neighbor. When you stumble back into the kitchen, you find the bottle still half full. The label, on closer inspection, now reads, may cause temporary drowsiness, mild euphoria, confusion, improvement, deterioration, or transformation. Consult a physician, shaman, or local clergy before use. It's an impressive range of outcomes, but you're not sure you're ready for another go. The town, however, is hooked. Some swear by the syrup, claiming it cured their back pain, gout, or existential dread. Others just enjoy the excuse for a socially acceptable 3-day nap. Dr. Hamilton's wagon is always parked in the busiest part of town, selling bottle after bottle to the hopeful, the desperate, and the chronically adventurous. You put the syrup back on the shelf, wiser if not healthier. You've missed your cousin's wedding, a visit from your old army buddy, and apparently a traveling circus. But, on the bright side, you also missed 3 days of chores. Not all miracles come the way you expect. In the end, Dr. Hamilton's miracle syrup remains what it's always been, an enigma in a bottle. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just a perfectly legal excuse to forget your troubles, if only for a little while. And for some days that's the best cure anyone can hope for. The bottle gets emptier, your tolerance gets higher, and pretty soon you're planning your day around pharmacy visits and plausible excuses. It happens quietly. At first, you tell yourself you're just taking what the doctor ordered. Just enough to take the edge off. Just a little to get through the night. Just a drop for those nerves that always seem to spike when the clock strikes 3. But as the weeks roll by, your prescription becomes less of a safety net and more of a daily agenda. Morning starts with a quick calculation. How much is left in the bottle? Will it last till Friday? And what's the best story to tell the pharmacist this time? It's for my nerves. The doctor said to double the dose. I have a very nervous dog. You become an expert in inventory management. The bottle on your nightstand is flanked by backup bottles in the pantry, the flour tin, and, for emergencies, behind the loose board in the barn. A sense of calm washes over you every time you confirm your secret stash is still there. And when a bottle runs dry, panic arrives, with the subtlety of a marching band. There's no worse feeling than shaking the last drops out, tilting the glass at every possible angle, and wishing you could wring out one more dose from the label. Tolerance is a trickster. What used to be a drop is now a spoonful. The piece that once came easy now requires careful planning, creative arithmetic, and a bit of gambling. Maybe just a little more today. I'll cut back tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow always arrives with another excuse. It was a hard day. The nightmares were worse. My leg ached. The neighbor's baby kept me up again. It all blurs together. A carousel of rationalizations that keep you reaching for the bottle, one day at a time. And yet, the world expects you to keep up appearances. At the general store, you force yourself to smile, hoping no one notices how jittery your hands have become, or the dark circles under your eyes. You see the knowing looks between the pharmacist and his assistant, their glances that say, "That's the 3rd time this week." So you rotate your visits, spreading them between towns, inventing distant relatives with mysterious ailments, or feigning surprise when the clerk recognizes you. Oh, am I here again? My memory's just not what it used to be. Your family starts asking questions. Didn't you just pick up a new bottle? Are you feeling all right? You brush them off. Just tired, just a headache. Nothing a little medicine won't fix. In the evenings you grow secretive, inventing errands just to sneak away for a moment's relief. Your wife notices the missing change in the household budget, the increase in empty bottles behind the shed, the way your mood swings with the sunrise and sunset. She doesn't say much, but the silence between you grows, heavier with every passing day. Dependence rewrites your priorities. Events and milestones are measured not by what you'll do, but by whether you'll have enough to get through them. A picnic, a wedding, even a visit from old friends, all planned around the reassuring clink of glass in your pocket. You no longer ask, "Can I make it without?" You ask, "Do I have enough?" Each day, the boundaries shift, and your sense of control slips further away. Yet, the voice in your head whispers the same refrain. Just one more dose. Just one more, and then you'll quit. Just one more, and things will be normal again. But normal left a long time ago. And now you're caught in the cycle. Chasing relief, outrunning shame, bargaining with yourself at every turn. The bottle gets emptier. Your hope grows thinner. But still, every morning, you wake up and search for a reason, any reason, to take just one more dose. And as the sun rises, you promise yourself that this time, you really mean it. This time, it's really the last. Some brave souls, usually not doctors, start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, morphine isn't the miracle everyone hoped for. A few medical journals print cautious warnings, immediately ignored by most of the population. You can sense the mood shifting, ever so slightly, in the back rooms and at the breakfast tables. There's a feeling that things have gotten weird. The town's most energetic preacher has been nodding off during Sunday services. The school teacher, usually known for her iron discipline, has taken to dismissing class early for personal reflection. Children play a new game called Doctor's Orders, which mostly involves pretending to fall asleep in the middle of the road. Some people begin to whisper that maybe it's not just the weather or nerves, or an especially difficult season. Maybe the medicine is making things worse. The first to say it out loud are rarely physicians. It's the grocer, the blacksmith, the stubborn grandmother who never trusted a modern remedy in the first place. Did you notice how Edna can't finish a sentence these days? Why does the doctor keep saying everything is mildly habit-forming? The whispers turn to questions, and questions turn, slowly, awkwardly, into warnings. A few crusading journalists and early reformers take up the cause. Are we trading one war for another? Asks an editorial buried deep in the third page of the Weekly Gazette, right next to the advertisement for Dr. Gladstone's opium-free liver pills. The warning is couched in polite language, hedged with enough maybes and perhapses to avoid offending any advertisers. Still, it's there, a small seed of doubt, sown among the testimonials and miracle cures. In the medical community, the response is muted. Most doctors, after all, have been prescribing morphine for years, with the cheerful confidence of a man recommending chicken soup for pneumonia. But here and there, you spot signs of professional anxiety. A medical journal quietly publishes a letter from an anonymous concerned physician who suggests that perhaps patients shouldn't be left alone with a bottle and the advice to take as needed. Another article proposes that maybe morphine should be reserved for serious cases, though nobody can agree on what serious means. The pharmacists are the first to feel the pinch. Suddenly, customers want to know what's actually in the bottle. They ask about alternatives. They request smaller doses, or occasionally a complete break, which is usually met with wide-eyed sympathy and a gentle suggestion to wait until after the harvest. A few towns experiment with keeping records, or requiring signatures, or locking up the good stuff behind the counter. The old-timers shake their heads and mutter, "Back in my day, a tonic was just a tonic." Of course, for every call for caution, there's a matching chorus of resistance. "I've been taking this syrup for years and never had a problem," says Mr. Hargrove, right before falling asleep in the middle of the town square. Some doctors take it as a personal insult. "Are you questioning my professional judgment?" They bristle, moustaches quivering with indignation. For every reformer, there are two more eager to sell another bottle, and a whole industry of advertisers to drown out the warnings with glowing testimonials and catchy jingles. But the pushback has begun, however small. A mother tells her daughter to cut back, just in case. Neighbors swap stories about who quit, who relapsed, who switched to ginger tea. A pamphlet appears on doorsteps titled "The Truth About Opium and Morphine," which half the town reads and the other half uses to light the stove. It's the beginning of something new, even if it feels uncertain. Doubt starts to creep in, riding alongside hope and habit. People begin to ask questions they never would have dared voice before, and while most still reach for the bottle, a few start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's a better way, something beyond the haze and the sleep and the sweet promises of a miracle that's too good to be true. After all, every change begins with a question, and questions are hard to silence, especially when nobody's really sleeping anyway. Former soldiers pen memoirs about their addiction, part confessional, part cautionary tale, part "please send help" and divided by or cookies. It turns out surviving the battlefield was only the prologue. For many veterans, the real story, messy, meandering, and often morphine-fueled, unfolds after they return home. If you wander through any late 19th century bookstore, past the stirring volumes on brotherhood and sacrifice, you'll find a very different genre emerging. Titles like "In the Arms of Morpheus," "Confessions of a Nervous Veteran," or the ever-popular "Lost My Leg," "Lost My Mind" start popping up in print, tucked between etiquette guides and Methodist hymnals. These memoirs are part diary, part therapy session, and part desperate shout into the void. They begin with noble intentions: to warn my brothers in arms of the perils that await. But within a few pages, the warnings slip into dark humor and frank admissions. On the second night of my withdrawal, I became convinced the neighbor's cow was speaking French. Some chapters read like grim medical records, daily doses, withdrawal symptoms, the endless cycle of bargaining with oneself. Today, I resolve to quit. Tomorrow, I resolve again. There's a wry camaraderie in the way these awesome authors write. Each story is a blend of deadpan observations and exasperated punchlines. "You think war makes a man wise," one memoirist writes, "but mostly it makes him tired, irritable, and prone to hiding bottles in the chicken coop." For every harrowing tale of night sweats and regret, there's an equally absurd anecdote about accidental overdoses at the Thanksgiving table, or waking up to discover you've written a love letter to your own boots. Publishers, never ones to miss a trend, begin marketing these memoirs as cautionary tales for the whole family, a must-read for every household, the advertisements say, especially if there's a suspicious number of empty bottles behind your shed. Book clubs form around the country, some for support, others for schadenfreude. Dinner parties now feature dramatic readings from 30 Days Without the Drop, followed by spirited debates over whether morphine is a curse, a comfort, or just another chapter in the long American tradition of making life harder than it needs to be. The most honest memoirs don't sugarcoat anything. They admit to shame, loneliness, and a recurring suspicion that morphine was a poor substitute for actual healing. "I learned to tie a tourniquet with one hand," one writer laments, "but no one taught me how to untie myself from my own habits." There are tales of marriages strained to breaking, jobs lost, friendships faded into fog. Every so often, there's a glimmer of hope, a story of someone who managed to quit, or at least cut back, and who now spends his days raising chickens and his nights writing poetry about chickens. Not all post-war ambitions are grand. If you read enough of these memoirs, a pattern emerges. The worst days are described in minute detail: cold sweats, hallucinations, the desperate hunt, for a sympathetic doctor. But the best days, when they come, are simple and quiet. A full night's sleep, a letter from an old friend, a morning with no shakes and no need for a bottle. Progress is measured in hours, not years. Recovery, if it comes, is a slow, halting crawl rather than a triumphant march. And, yes, there are requests for help, sometimes for advice, sometimes for cookies. Send ginger snaps. Morphine does nothing for my sweet tooth. The authors know their audience: fellow sufferers, curious neighbors, family members still trying to understand why their loved one paces the floor at 2 a.m. In the end, these memoirs are more than confessions. They're a record of a nation trying to make sense of its scars, a testament to stubborn hope, and a gentle plea for understanding. If you find one of these books, dog-eared and tea-stained, tucked into a box of old letters, read it slowly. Inside, you'll find the story of a survivor, not just of war, but of everything that came after. And maybe, just maybe, a recipe for the world's best ginger snaps. In the 1890s, officials finally notice that half the town is sleepwalking. Regulations are proposed, discussed, and generally shrugged at. The pharmacy still sells whatever you ask for, just with more paperwork. It's been decades since morphine quietly invaded America's parlors, kitchens, and battlefield hospitals. But now, at last, the government stirs from its own morphine haze to take action, or, more accurately, to take notes and host committees. Senators read reports with alarm: rising rates of addiction, citizens napping in town squares, and a disturbing trend of children growing up with a suspicious fondness for the doctor's special syrup. Clearly, something must be done, preferably after lunch and not too close to an election. The first wave of reforms starts with a flurry of paperwork. Pharmacies receive letters stamped urgent, outlining the need for record-keeping, locked cabinets, and occasional lectures about public health. The local pharmacist, who has been handing out morphine with the same enthusiasm as peppermints, suddenly finds himself filling out forms. Name, address, reason for purchase, probable risk of napping in public. The questions multiply, the bottles shrink, and a new breed of customer emerges. The sly negotiator, skilled at inventing symptoms and dodging signatures. Doctors are now encouraged, though not required, to think twice before prescribing. Medical journals publish editorials about responsible use and the dangers of chemical dependency, sandwiched between ads for invigorating nerve tonics and invigorating hair tonics. Sometimes the same thing. Public lectures are scheduled, most of which are sparsely attended except by local cranks and the occasional busybody with a personal grudge against the town pharmacist. The new laws are clear as mud. Yes, morphine can still be sold, just in smaller bottles, preferably with a new label, and ideally with a lecture attached. The real reform is in the paperwork, carbon copies, ledgers, and a filing system that will one day delight historians and confuse everyone else. Pharmacists learn to perfect the art of the knowing nod, slipping a bottle across the counter to regulars while loudly discussing the weather. Regulation, one old-timer jokes, means you have to buy 2 bottles if you want to avoid suspicion. Out on the streets, the effect is less dramatic than the lawmakers hoped. The habituals, as they're now called, find ways around the new rules, borrowing children, forging notes, visiting multiple towns in a single day. Traveling salesmen get creative, offering herbal infusions with a wink and a nudge. Recipes for home-brewed nerve tonics circulate among the hopeful and the desperate. People still crave relief, and where there's demand, there's always supply, regulation or no regulation. Occasionally, an arrest is made or a fine is issued, mostly for show. The headlines trumpet a crackdown on morphine mischief. But by the time the ink dries, most townsfolk are back to business as usual. The government's solution, it turns out, is to add another layer of polite bureaucracy to an epidemic that prefers backdoors and whispered transactions. Even so, the mood begins to shift. There's a growing awareness, awkward, sometimes resentful, that the old miracle cure isn't as miraculous as it seemed. Neighbors watch each other more closely. Doctors hold onto their prescription pads a bit tighter. Bottles are tucked away, out of sight. Some families try to quit, some succeed, and others simply grow more inventive. The government's rules might be porous, but the sense of consequence is real. It's the end of the morphine free-for-all, even if nobody's quite sure what comes next. In the end, regulation arrives like a chaperone at a party that's already winding down. The bottles are still on the shelves, the pharmacies are still open, but the golden age of easy relief is fading. The paperwork piles up. The country's wide-eyed experiment with morphine is slowly, fitfully drawing to a close. And if you still want a taste of the good stuff, well, just be prepared to fill out a few forms. Nod and promise, with a straight face, that it's for your nerves. After all, in America, nothing is truly forbidden. It's just regulated, sort of. You decide to quit for real this time. You surround yourself with blankets, supportive family, and the knowledge that you once survived the Battle of Antietam. Surely you can survive a night without morphine? Probably. At first, you're almost optimistic. You gather your supplies, thick wool blankets, a pot of weak tea, and every reassuring phrase you can remember from your days in uniform. Your family rallies around you, bustling about with hopeful smiles, as if you're attempting a simple home improvement project and not waging all-out war with your own nervous system. Just one night, you promise. If I can make it till morning, I'll be fine. The first hour is easy enough. You wrap yourself in a cocoon of warmth, sip your tea, and pretend the worst is behind you. Your wife knits in the next room, humming softly. The children whisper their goodnights from the hallway, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. You stare at the ceiling and tell yourself, you've made it through worse. After all, what's a little restlessness compared to cannonballs and cavalry charges? Then the hours stretch. The fire burns low. Your skin prickles with cold, and you shiver beneath 3 layers of blankets. Your body is convinced you've been locked outside in December. Your bones ache in places you're pretty sure don't even have names. The sweat starts, hot, clammy, determined to soak every bit of bedding in the house. Your family returns, bearing more tea, another quilt, and increasingly nervous encouragement. You're doing great, they say, as though you've just learned to walk. Not much longer now. But your mind is the real battlefield. As midnight approaches, your thoughts race. You start to bargain with yourself. One small dose, you think. Just enough to sleep. You picture the bottle hidden away, but not far. Every sound in the house is magnified. The ticking clock, the settling floorboards, the distant creak of a neighbor's wagon. The world outside is asleep, but inside your own head, the night is loud and relentless. The physical symptoms ramp up. Shaking, chills, muscle cramps. You curl up tighter, hoping to ride it out, but your body rebels with every nerve ending. Your hands clench and unclench, your teeth chatter, your stomach knots. You try breathing exercises you vaguely recall from a pamphlet on nervous constitution. They don't help. You consider running laps around the house, but the energy just isn't there. Your family takes shifts at your bedside, passing you water, squeezing your hand, mopping your brow, offering a steady stream of encouragement, and, occasionally, gentle threats. If you touch that bottle, I'm sleeping with the key. Somewhere in the middle of the night, your mind drifts to strange places. The dreams, when they come, are jumbled. Flashes of battlefields, homecomings, days spent fishing on the river, and a recurring nightmare involving your old sergeant singing lullabies. You wake again, heart pounding, disoriented, and more tired than before. But still, no morphine. By dawn, you're exhausted. Every muscle aches, every joint feels twice its age. And you're fairly certain you've survived a second war. This one fought under a fortress of blankets. The worst is over, they tell you, but you're not so sure. You want to sleep, but more than that, you want to feel human again. The world outside the window is grey, quiet, and a little less threatening. You made it through the night. Recovery isn't a straight path. Some days, the cravings come back strong. Some nights, the cold sweat returns. Your family keeps watch. The blankets stay close, and the bottle stays locked away. There are setbacks. Sometimes you falter. Sometimes you start over. But every morning you wake, without morphine, is a tiny victory. A reminder that you're still here, still fighting, still finding your way back. And as you rise, shaky but determined, you remember you survived Antietam. You can survive this. The battle is hard, the nights are long, but you're not alone. And that makes all the difference. Years go by, and the bottles disappear, mostly, but the legacy remains. Hidden in medical textbooks, family secrets, and the peculiar American tradition of treating everything with just a little something extra. Sleep comes easier these days. But the story lingers, fuzzy, bittersweet, and still slightly addictive. The morphine bottles, once so common they rattled in every kitchen drawer, slowly vanish from sight. Some get packed away in trunks with old war medals and faded love letters. Others are lost behind cellar walls or buried at the back of a family medicine cabinet, wedged between expired mustard plasters and a box of dubious cough drops. Occasionally, one is unearthed by a grandchild on a rainy afternoon, a relic with a label promising health, happiness, and possibly the ability to sleep through a thunderstorm. Doctors eventually swap out morphine for safer, or at least less notorious, alternatives. Medical journals fill with stories about the morphine habit of the last generation, written with a curious mix of shame and nostalgia. We didn't know any better, they say, as they prescribe something new and just as poorly understood. Future nurses and doctors study the era with a mix of horror and envy, horror at the side effects, envy at the freedom to treat anything with a generous dash of miracle elixir. But even as the bottles disappear, the need for comfort doesn't. The instinct to reach for a remedy, to numb the pain, to chase a little peace at bedtime, remains part of the American spirit. There's always another solution, sometimes a pill, sometimes a wellness tonic, sometimes a midnight snack. Each generation finds its own beat version of the morphine bottle, whether it's a prescription pad, a self-help book, or a late-night infomercial for sleep-inducing mattresses with names like the Nap King. Family stories carry the memories. Great-grandmothers whisper about the blue bottle that helped them through hard times. Grandfathers claim they kicked the habit after the third or fourth try, or at least swapped to something with less paperwork. The children and grandchildren who grew up in the shadow of the morphine era learn a peculiar lesson. You can survive almost anything, but there's always a price for shortcuts, especially the ones that taste like licorice and burn all the way down. American culture adapts, but it never quite forgets. The country keeps its fascination with miracle cures and easy fixes, from patent medicines to pyramid schemes to newfangled beverages that promise energy, relaxation, and a smaller waistline. Advice columns move on from morphine to nervous exhaustion to self-care, but the underlying message is the same. Life is hard, and sometimes you just want something to take the edge off. There's humor, too, in the way the story is remembered. The morphine era becomes the subject of dinner table jokes and family reunions. Remember when Uncle Henry fell asleep in the middle of his own birthday toast? Someone laughs. Or when Grandma swore by her special syrup. Just don't ask what was in it. The legacy becomes a blend of cautionary tale and comedic relief. A story to remind everyone that survival sometimes looks a little absurd. Still, in quieter moments, the lessons poke through. People talk more openly about pain, about anxiety, about the need for real help. Not just the kind that comes in a bottle. There's a growing understanding that healing takes more than numbness. It takes time, honesty, and a little bit of stubbornness. Communities build new support systems. Doctors learn to ask more questions. Families keep an eye out for old habits and new risks. And so, as the decades roll by, the story of morphine's rise and fall settles into the background of American life. Never fully forgotten, never quite finished. The edge blurs, the pain dulls, but the lesson lingers. Comfort is tempting, but nothing replaces genuine care. Sleep comes easier now, but every once in a while, as you drift off, you might hear the echo of that old story. Bittersweet, absurd, and unmistakably human. Nights are long, and reality is negotiable. Somewhere between sleep and waking, you start seeing old comrades in the corner of your room. Sometimes they're telling you to go back to sleep. Other times they're asking where you hid the last biscuit. Is it a haunting, a vivid memory, or just a side effect of your nightly morphine chaser? Welcome to the confusing world of Civil War veteran dreams, where every shadow is suspicious and your own mind is just another battlefield. You never know what the night will bring. As dusk settles, your bedroom grows quieter, the outside world slipping away until it's just you, your blankets, and the flickering lamplight. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaks, or maybe it's a drumbeat in the distance. Your mind can't tell the difference anymore. You lie there, listening to the strange symphony of a house at rest. Your thoughts starting to wander down old, rutted roads. The dreams don't always wait for sleep. Sometimes, as you're drifting, the edge of reality blurs. You glance at the chair in the corner and catch the shape of Private Watson. Boots up, hat askew, grinning like he just won a hand of cards with an extra ace. "Don't worry, I'm just passing through," he whispers, voice half lost to memory. You try to nod but can't quite move, caught between worlds. By morning, he's gone, and you're left with the lingering feeling that someone borrowed your socks. Morphine does odd things to your sense of time and place. Some nights, you're sure you're back in camp, surrounded by tents and the smoky glow of 100 lanterns. Someone is telling a story, something about a horse, a tin can, and General Grant. The punchline never arrives. Instead, you wake up mid-laugh, pillow damp, heart pounding. Other nights, the dreams turn spooky. The walls stretch, the shadows lengthen, and familiar faces peer out from behind curtains or inside mirrors. You stare back, wondering if they're ghosts, memories, or just your brain trying to entertain itself at your expense. Your family gets used to your midnight wanderings. They find you pacing the hall, muttering to yourself or trying to shoo invisible guests out the door. "Just getting some air," you explain, trying to sound casual as you check under the table for a missing canteen. Some mornings your wife asks if you slept well. You answer honestly, "It depends. Was I home? Or was I marching through Tennessee in my nightshirt again?" The line between haunting and hallucination blurs further with every dose. A dose too many, and you might spend half an hour negotiating with a ghostly cook over the proper way to boil army beans. Too little, and you're stuck wide awake, heart racing, listening to the wind and wondering if that thud in the attic is just the house settling or a regimental reunion. You're not the only one. Other veterans in town share their own night stories over coffee. Waking up convinced they're back in camp, swearing they smelled pipe smoke in the nursery, insisting they heard old Captain Brown reciting roll call from the front porch. The local preacher says it's just troubled minds. The pharmacist suggests less excitement before bed. You're pretty sure it's all of the above, with a little morphine for good measure. In a way, the ghost stories are comforting. They're proof you're not alone. Proof the war hasn't stolen your memories, just rearranged them into a late-night slideshow. Sometimes you even look forward to the visits. Old friends appear to offer advice, to laugh, to remind you that once, long ago, you were all something more than tired men in creaky beds. It's not always restful, but it is familiar. A strange blend of comfort, confusion, and the peculiar peace that comes from knowing you've survived. So you settle in for another night, bottle at hand, uncertain whether you'll dream of battlefields or biscuit thieves. In the world between sleep and waking, the past isn't gone, it's just waiting for you to close your eyes. And if you wake to find Private Watson in your kitchen, well, just tell him the biscuits are all gone. That usually sends him back to the other side. It's 1870, and you're trying to get through breakfast without remembering the war. Good news, there's a new cookbook in town, featuring helpful recipes like calming custard and pain, free pancakes, each with a hearty splash of morphine. If you thought Grandma's secret ingredient was love, surprise, it's actually an opiate. Suddenly, family dinner feels like a pharmaceutical experiment with more napping than usual. In this brave new world of home cooking, every kitchen shelf boasts not just flour and baking powder, but a few mysterious vials with labels like Dr. Harrington's soothing syrup and Mrs. Winslow's wonderful drops. Gone are the days when cinnamon was the most exciting spice in the house. Now, the real action happens in the medicine drawer, where bottles of morphine sit ready to liven up the blandest meal, or, more accurately, mellow it out so much that nobody's awake long enough to complain. The new miracle cure cookbooks sweep the country, promising a delicious solution for every ailment. Trouble sleeping? Try opium oatmeal. Persistent headache? Whip up a morphine muffin. Sunday dinner guests won't stop reminiscing about the war. Serve a slice of forget-me-not fruitcake, guaranteed to hush even the chattiest in-law. The recipes are as optimistic as they are oblivious. Add 2 drops of morphia for nerves, 4 if you want a quiet afternoon, and an extra dash for especially trying relatives. What's truly remarkable is the casual confidence with which these recipes are shared. Ladies' magazines trade dessert ideas that double as sedation, and advice columns recommend a spoonful in every stew for that gentle family harmony. Church bake sales become a bit more interesting, with parishioners walking home in a daze, forgetting if they ever bought that pie or where they left their shoes. Children aren't left out of the fun either. Teething biscuits and nursery puddings get a dash of the good stuff to help little ones rest. When baby finally sleeps through the night, it's less a miracle and more a well-timed dose. School lunchboxes feature cookies that promise not just a sugar rush, but a gentle landing. Playground squabbles disappear, replaced by a generation of suspiciously mellow children, all nodding off in their arithmetic lessons. The effect on family life is profound. Breakfast is the quietest meal of the day. The dinner table, once a hotbed of spirited debate and clattering cutlery, now features long, peaceful silences and the occasional gentle snore. Even the dog spends most afternoons snoozing under the stove, courtesy of a calm canine gravy recipe clipped from the latest pamphlet. If anyone in the household has actual energy, It's considered a medical mystery, to be treated with another helping of soothing soup. Inevitably, a few skeptics raise concerns. Aunt Martha, who remembers life before morphine muffins, squints suspiciously at her pudding, wondering if dessert is supposed to taste like licorice and regret. A handful of newspaper writers pen cautious editorials. Are our kitchens curing us, or just keeping us quiet? Their warnings, however, are drowned out by the latest restful raspberry tart recipe sweeping the local tea parties. The true miracle is how normal it all seems. The doctor visits for supper and compliments the tranquil turnip mash, never mentioning he wrote half the recipes in circulation. Cookbooks sell out. Church ladies trade recipe cards with a wink. And somewhere in the background, the faint hum of contented snoring echoes through the neighborhood. Over time, as science catches up and questions grow louder, the morphine begins to disappear from the pantry. New cookbooks appear, lighter on the sedatives, heavier on the baking powder. But for a golden decade, American cuisine was defined by the curious blend of sugar, spice, and a dash of something extra to help you forget your troubles, at least until dessert was served. So next time you dig into a family recipe and wonder what made it so special, just remember, sometimes the most comforting ingredient is the one everyone agrees to never talk about again. You finally save up enough for a family portrait. The photographer tells you to hold still and look natural, but nobody warns you about the tremors if you skipped your morning dose. In the background of every Civil War veteran's photo is a subtle detail: glazed eyes, a half-hidden bottle, or a suspiciously blissful stare that says, "I'm not just smiling, I'm lightly sedated." These portraits become cherished family heirlooms and a time capsule of 19th century coping mechanisms. The whole process of getting your picture taken is a production. You gather your best shirt, clean if not exactly pressed, comb your hair, and practice your stoic yet approachable face in the looking glass. Your family fidgets nervously, everyone trying to remember how to look dignified for 5 straight minutes, which is about 4.5 minutes longer than most people can manage on an average Tuesday. The photographer's wagon is the most exciting thing to roll through town since the last snake oil salesman, and people line up to immortalize their likeness for posterity and for bragging rights at church. The photographer is part artist, part magician, part drill sergeant. He sets up his imposing black box on spindly legs, carefully arranges the backdrop, a scenic rendering of Niagara Falls if you're lucky, and issues instructions in a voice that brooks no nonsense. Chins up, eyes open. Don't blink for the next 30 seconds. He disappears under a velvet curtain and, with a puff of smoke and a chemical stink, captures a moment that will haunt your descendants for generations. But for Civil War veterans, holding still is its own challenge. The tremor in your hands starts small, but grows with every second you're forced to sit in perfect silence. If you're feeling brave, you'll skip the morning morphine and hope nobody notices the sweat beading on your brow. If you're realistic, you sneak a dose beforehand and do your best to look heroic, yet approachable, yet not asleep. The result is a series of portraits where veterans look either faintly alarmed or suspiciously blissed out, depending on timing and chemistry. The bottles appear in the photos too, tucked into jacket pockets, half hidden beneath handkerchiefs, sometimes held gently in the lap, just out of focus, but never truly out of sight. Some veterans clutch their canes with a white-knuckled grip. Others rest a reassuring hand on the family dog, hoping nobody notices the little glass vial peeking out from the folds of their coat. In group photos, there's always one person with the serene, slightly glassy smile of someone who's decided that if you can't remember the moment, at least you won't be anxious about it. Photographers, for their part, are discreet. They've seen it all: wobbly knees, sudden naps, entire families with the faraway gaze of people still half living in their dreams. They adjust their process accordingly. A little longer exposure for grandpa, they murmur, and perhaps a chair for mother. If a child dozes off during the shoot, it's chalked up to the excitement, and not the special teething biscuits that Aunt Rose packed in her reticule. Once the portraits are finished, they become treasures, propped on the mantelpiece, tucked into Bibles, mailed across the country with carefully scripted notes. In the years to come, descendants will puzzle over the expressions, the posture, the mysterious objects in the background. Was Great-Uncle Silas always that dreamy-eyed? Why did Aunt Hattie look so relaxed on picture day? And why is there a bottle on the windowsill that's been artfully blurred by a stray sunbeam? The family portrait, meant to capture togetherness, tells another story too. The silent struggles, the private reliefs, and the not-so-secret habits that carried people through the unspoken aches of a post-war world. These images are not just mementos, but gentle reminders that behind every serene smile and stiff collar is a very human story of endurance, of coping, and of the many creative ways people held themselves together, one photograph, and sometimes one dose, at a time. And so, as tonight's journey drifts to a close, let's take a moment to breathe, slowly, deeply, and for once without the aid of 19th century pharmaceuticals. You've survived the trenches and the tent hospitals, the clatter of bone saws and the rattle of tin cups, and you've even weathered the long, sleepless nights of America's original morphine crisis. Maybe you've laughed, maybe you've winced, but you made it, unlike that bottle of Dr. Hamilton's syrup you lost under the bed in 1873. The world of the 1860s was brutal in ways we can barely imagine. Pain was a constant companion. Hope was doled out in teaspoons, and medical advice sounded suspiciously like a dare. But somehow, people endured. They stitched themselves together with grit, with humor, and, let's be honest, with a pharmaceutical toolkit that would make modern doctors faint. Was it disturbing? Absolutely. Was it darkly hilarious? Definitely. But it was also human, a reminder that even in our lowest moments, we look for relief, comfort, and maybe a little sleep. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a clean bed, no lice, no draft, no need to barter for a good night's rest. Maybe send a quiet thank you back through time. Thank the stubborn veterans who got up every morning, the families who coped with chaos, and even the quack doctors who tried, and sometimes spectacularly failed, to heal. They survived with the tools they had, flawed as they were. And because of them, we get to enjoy the luxury of painkillers with warning labels and sleep that doesn't come with a side of existential dread. Remember, history isn't just suffering. It's a marathon of ridiculousness, resilience, and hope. And if those Civil War veterans could make it through a night fueled by questionable remedies and even more questionable decisions, you can definitely make it through whatever tomorrow throws at you, preferably with less morphine and more gratitude for the little things. Rest well. You've earned it. Good night.